Hello, on December 19th, 2022, Alfredo Fori here in conversation with Japan's foremost photographer, Mr. Yasu Nakaoka. Welcome to Success Tips Global.
Thank you very much, Everett. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to your show.
Great. So the first thing is, what are you most well known for?
What am I most well known for? No, I don't know if I'm well known for anything. Well, I do photography. I also I have this love for music, like 70s rock music. I know, a lot of people think I know a lot about that music. And also some people look at me as the bilingual kid, because
Right.
I grew up overseas and I'm sort of biculture, I guess, not your ordinary Japanese,
Right.
what they think.
So
But
what's your primary profession then? I
oh,
know you as a photographer, yeah?
yes, my primary profession is photography, and I've been a photographer since 1984 here in Japan. So pretty soon it'll be 40 years in business.
Okay, wow. So then there would be a lot to talk about. Who are some of the famous people you've photographed?
Famous people. Well, since I'm based here in Japan, I mean, I do photograph people who come to Japan from overseas and stuff. But it's mainly, the Japanese people. So you know, I've done a few prime ministers.
Wow.
Uh, I've also met some Nobel Prize winners
Oh,
and scientists and a lot of corporate CEOs,
okay. What about products?
products. I used to do that. I don't do as many products. I mean, if people ask me to do it, I'll do it. But
Okay.
I don't have my own studio here.
Right.
I used to have a studio
Mm,
one time, but I'm kind of downsized. So
right.
unless people are willing to, like provide a space to shoot the product or rent a rental studio,
Right.
and I'll do it. But most of the time, I just photograph people.
Mm, mm, mm. Okay, so when in your life did you decide that you wanted to be a photographer?
Oh, this is when I was going to college at UCLA. I was
Okay.
originally a civil engineering major.
Wow.
And well, I figured, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm,
Like at high school, it's like there's a time when in your senior year
mm,
to sort of decide where you want to go to college.
right.
So I decided I wanted to go to someplace in LA, and I ended up going to UCLA. But in the application form, I didn't know that you can write undeclared, at
Okay.
the time. So I thought you had to say write something like, I want to study this in order for them to accept you. So
Okay.
at the time, I was good in math and science, so I said civil engineering, or
Okay.
a whole essay about how I wanted to build the city and all that. So I
Right.
said, and then I went to UCLA and I studied for about 3 years, I guess, in that field. But it was just so, a different level.
Mm,
I mean, I kept up with the calculus and the math part,
okay.
physics, chemistry, and then the engineering classes. The problem with that was that I had professors from all over the world who barely spoke English, and you couldn't understand
Okay.
what the hell they were saying.
Right,
And,
right.
and I just gradually lost interest in that,
Mm,
and I couldn't see myself sitting at a desk figuring out all these things with all this responsibility, like like a bridge collapsing and all that.
okay.
So right around that time, I had a party at my house, and one of the people who came was a photographer, and I
Mm,
oh, photography. So I liked photography as a hobby,
okay.
and so I spoke with him all night. What do you do? And he goes, oh, I photograph album covers for records.
Okay.
What album jacket did you do? And he goes, oh, I did this. And I go, oh, wow, I have that, and so I was asking a lot of things about photography, and he was telling me that, if I really wanted to go into that field, that I should, go to a good school, and that was
Okay.
Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara.
Okay. And
That's
how was the experience of going to that school?
Which one? The Brooks Institute?
The
That's,
photography school.
unfortunately, they just closed down about 3 years ago, so it's no more.
Okay.
Had a history of I don't know, 80 years or something,
Wow.
But at the time, it was the best photography school in the United States, and the experience was great because they really trained you so that when you graduated, you could actually, make your living as a photographer.
Right.
So it was intense, but it was my second. I already spent all that time at UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, well, okay, this time I'm not going to waste it, So I really
Right.
studied hard.
What was the scene in California at that time? The social, the social fabric of California at the time when you were a university student there.
Okay, well, when I was in California, that was in the 70s. I went in 1975.
Okay.
The photography school started in 1980.
Okay.
So it was the 70s, beginning of 80s, still very, compared to now, it was very free. You could, at that time, I look back at it now, and I wish I can go back because there were so many opportunities out there for you. You could say, I want to do this, and it was easy to do. But now everything's, it takes a lot more. It's not, the doors aren't open as much,
Right.
So, it's not like the hippies in the 60s, but still, it was very laid back in the 70s.
Right.
The way I look at it is it was the time of opportunities to do whatever you wanted to do,
Yeah, sometimes I want to see what connections there might be between a person's childhood and what they ultimately become. And I'm just curious, were you born in Japan or in the US?
I was born in Japan. I was born in Osaka, Japan,
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
in 1956, which makes me 66 years old now.
Okay. And then in your very early years, did you spend it in Osaka?
Well, I was born in Osaka, and when I was 3, my father was working for what do you call it, a trading company, Mitsubishi Shoji.
Oh, yes.
And so we got transferred to London in 59, and we were there for 1 year. I didn't speak a word of English. And then after that, we got transferred to New York. And so I was in New York from like 1960 to 65. We came back to Japan in 1965.
Okay.
Then I was in Tokyo for like 2 years or so. And after that, we moved to Osaka for another 2 years. And then, no, it wasn't 2 years, a little bit more than that. Because when I was in after I just finished the first semester of 8th grade, we got transferred to Beirut, Lebanon, in the Middle East. So I went to Lebanon. I lived in Beirut, going to the American school there.
Okay.
For about 2.5 years until we got transferred back to Tokyo. And it was in 1983, and we just got out of there before that whole civil war broke out.
Yes.
It went on for like 10 years or whatever. And so when I came back to Japan, my father said, you have 2 choices. You can go back to a Japanese school.
Okay.
Have to go back like 2.5 years, start at grade 8, where I stopped. Or I was a junior, like 11th grade by then.
Okay.
Go straight to 11th grade at the American school.
I see.
I said, I want to go to the American school.
Okay.
So I started going to the American school. And then when time came to decide where you want to go for college, at that time, there were only 2 choices. I mean, coming out of the American school, the only universities here in Japan, Tokyo, that accepted you was Sophia.
Okay.
And the ICU.
Okay, International Christian University.
Right. And since most of my friends were, leaving for the States, and I just felt like I wanted to go someplace new. So that's how I ended up in Los Angeles, going to UCLA.
Was it a difficult adjustment, or did you find it easy to blend in once you go to the US? Yeah.
Into the US?
Yeah.
Well, since I was going to the American school in Beirut and also
Okay. Yes.
that was very gradual, you know.
Okay.
As far as like, living in all these different places, sure,
Mm,
the
mm, mm.
first time you get there, it takes a little while, but then, when you're a kid, it only takes like maybe a month to adjust.
Right,
Next
right.
thing you know, you feel like you're a local, and
Mm, mm,
blend
mm. Wow. Mm. Well, who is Carl Fisher?
Carl Fisher. Okay. A photographer that was quite famous in the 60s and 70s. He's a what do you call it? A commercial photographer who does
Okay.
advertising, photography, magazine, and all that stuff. And back in the 60s, Richard Avedon was one very big name. Irving
Hmm.
Penn was another. And then there was Carl Fisher.
Okay.
And Carl Fisher was well known in the 60s for his, he shot the covers of Esquire magazines,
Yeah. Yeah.
60s and 70s, which were quite controversial.
Mm,
They would always pick a subject that was a very hot topic,
mm.
and he would photograph them in the studio in a very controversial way. Like
Okay.
uh, at the time during the Vietnam War,
Mm.
there was that massacre that, remember Lieutenant, was it Carey or something?
Oh, with the gunshot or no?
No, 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 not that. But this guy, he was a lieutenant in the military in
Mm.
U.S. forces who massacred a whole village of
Oh,
people.
is it the My Lai massacre?
Is it? I'm
Yeah,
not.
there
Yeah,
was a famous.
but it was a very famous massacre in Vietnam, and they, for the cover of Esquire magazine, they brought him to the studio. They didn't tell him that they were going to bring all these Vietnamese children surrounding him,
Oh,
and he took this picture. Always some kind of controversial thing.
okay. Mm, mm,
Yeah, so I learned about him in school when I was studying photography at Brooks Institute,
okay.
and he was one of the photographers. After coming out of Brooks Institute, most students went to assist photographers so they can
Okay.
learn the business aspect, because they learned the technical part in school.
Right.
Wanted the real life experience, how the business is run and all that.
Okay.
So they'll usually assist for photographers. So I decided, well, New York is where all the very big time photographers
Mm,
were. So I made a list of course, all my other friends who were in New York already said, well, it, it's not easy to find a job,
mm.
you could be sitting there doing nothing for months, So I made a list of like maybe I think 6 photographers that I really wanted to work for, and I sent
Okay.
my resume to them. And it just happened that Carl Fisher was looking for someone, and I
Mm,
could start right away. So I said, okay, that's where I'll go.
okay. Mm,
Good experience, huh?
mm, mm. So, what would you say you learned that was valuable from him?
From him, it was how to the efficiency. He's very precise, efficient, and so I picked up on a lot of that. I don't like to work very loosely or anything. I
Mm, mm,
just
mm.
like to,
Okay.
in order to do this shoot, I have to do this, and then sort of organize myself and all that. So
Mm,
yeah, a lot of that came from Carl.
okay. And at what point did you decide to come to Japan and establish yourself?
Well, if I had it, I love New York so much that I wanted to stay on and
Okay.
just become a New York photographer.
Mm.
But the problem was that, I'm the only son, and my father
Okay.
passed away during my senior year
Oh,
at the American school here in Japan.
okay.
And so that just left my mother alone.
Mm, mm,
And she was very depressed
mm.
since, I lost my father. And so I couldn't, you know, going to the States was, a decision, like, because I had to leave my mother here in Japan.
Right.
But my grandmother said to me, "Don't worry, Yasu, go to the States and do your studies. I'll, we'll look after her for you."
Mhm.
So, that was happening. But then my grandmother passed away.
Oh,
And so I figured, well, I have to go back,
mm,
look after my mother now. So that's
right.
when I decided to come back. And that was like in 1980, beginning of 84.
Okay. Mm, mm, mm. And was it difficult to set yourself up?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know anyone here.
Right.
Usually the Japanese photographers, they go to school and then they work for these Japanese photographers, and then the photographers will give them some of their work, to
Okay.
get them start. I
Mm,
had nobody.
mm,
So, just like in the US, I would call people up and say, "Hey, would you see me?" And I
okay.
go in, I talk to all these photographers, and I got a lot of advice.
Mm, mm, mm.
But yeah, here and there, run into someone who works for a fashion magazine. He goes, "Oh, you want to shoot fashion?" I go, "I never have done that before."
Okay.
Oh, it's easy. So I started doing that, and I
Mm,
ended up
mm.
doing that for 7 years.
Okay. Wow. So, what are some memorable experiences of traveling to photograph things here in Japan?
To photograph.
Yeah. For example, going to different cities.
Yeah, well, in Japan, you're saying not
Yeah.
just travel in general or related to work.
Related to work. Yeah.
Um, Related to work, it's usually not interesting. Probably the most interesting was that happened last year.
Okay.
I went down to Saga Prefecture.
Okay.
It was to photograph what do you call those things? It's a very expensive spice
Mm,
that blooms in the fall. Oh, jeez.
it's okay.
But Saga and that whole Oita area is very famous for the,
Okay.
oh boy, saffron.
Oh, okay. 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 Mm,
So I went down to this saffron farm and it was in the middle of nowhere, but
mm,
the nature was so beautiful.
okay.
And
Mm,
yeah, that was memorable. And as far as just, oh, actually, you know what? There's another place that really was memorable was Sado Island.
okay. I've heard of, yeah.
Oh, that place was really beautiful.
Mm, mm, mm,
And I don't know if I want to go there in the winter. I went
mm.
there in the summer and also in the fall, which
Mm,
is quite
mm.
nice.
Okay.
And yeah, I could see myself spending some time there.
Mm, mm, mm. What about other parts of Asia, whether for work or just traveling? Any places that you found memorable?
Well, every place I go was quite interesting, because
Mm,
I've never been there before.
right.
Macau was quite interesting.
Mhm,
Hong Kong.
mhm,
Um, but very memorable was this island in the Philippines called Siargao Island or something.
mm,
It's where all the surfers go.
okay.
I went there to photograph some furniture.
Mm,
The kind of furniture that they have resort furniture, like by the poolside or
okay.
outdoors, and like at a cafe.
Right.
The outdoor furniture.
Yes. Yes.
So there's this resort hotel
Mhm.
on that island that's run by one of the largest manufacturers of these furnitures. And basically, it's like a showroom of their furniture, but in the form of a resort hotel.
Okay.
That was quite nice.
Mm, 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 mm. Okay. So at some point also you were involved in the film industry, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. Well, how I got into, film was one of the most, you know, things on my list that I wanted to learn about, but
Okay.
being a still photographer,
Right.
it's hard to get into that. While I was a still photographer, I happened to meet this guy who ran a software company, and
Okay.
I did some still photography for him.
Mm.
And then this is during the IT boom here, like when Windows 95 came out.
Okay.
Yeah, he's making all the software for the Windows 95, graphics software called
Mm.
Paint Shop Pro. Well, he's the localizing the Paint Shop Pro and a few other
Mm.
software. And so all of a sudden he took off and he had all this money, from the IT thing, and he goes, Yasu, his hobby was film. I mean, he loved films and he owned thousands of laser discs and he was always talking about movies,
Okay.
and he goes, my dream is to, like make our own commercials, and all that. And I go, wow, I wish I could help, but I don't know anything about film. And then he goes to me, Yasu, I mean, it's easy. He goes, I tell you what, if you want to work with me,
Mm.
I'll pay for you to go to the New York University film
Wow.
school for like one semester. And he goes, that's what
Right.
you need. And, and then you come back and we'll make TV commercials for a
Mm.
company together. And so it sounded like a good deal. And I thought, well, if I pass on this thing, I'll never
Mm.
have an opportunity like that. If it
Right.
fails, I can always go back to photography. So
Mm.
I took him up on that. And so for about 5 years, I stopped taking pictures and I was working for him in this IT
Wow.
company,
Mm.
making film.
Mm. 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 Was there a big difference between that and photography?
Yeah. I mean, with photography, it's just like one image. You
Okay.
tell a story with one image.
Mm. Mm.
Whereas film, it's like this, you have the span and you
Mm.
tell a story over this time. So you have to build like a storyboard,
Right.
and
Right.
then, so it was even more, it's more multi-dimensional than
Mm.
photography, whereas photography to me at the time seemed two-dimensional and
Right.
film
Mm.
expanded it.
Mm. 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 So let's talk about the pandemic period. How
Mhm.
was it for photographers in general and for you in particular?
Oh, it's, just like any other business, it's quite
Mm.
bad, because especially in my case where I photograph people, I go to companies to photograph people. So
Right.
that was like a no-no, all of a sudden, no, you couldn't come to the company, they canceled all the photography that involved people.
Mm.
But then again, there were still, because I don't just photograph any people, but a lot of executives.
Yes. Mm.
Executive portraits is one of my fortes, but
Okay.
um, because of that, executives, I also photograph lawyers for these global law firms,
Okay.
and they always seem to, I guess, need pictures. So even with the pandemic, I managed to go to some of these companies and still
Mm.
stay alive. And then the
Right.
rest, the government, with all the government, what was this, the money gifts that they gave out to businesses and stuff, that helped me out,
Right, right, right. Mm. So, what do you do for fun?
for fun.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know what I find fun these days as I'm getting old, but I spend most of the whenever I'm not working, I go to the gym, I work out.
Okay. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Okay. And what advice would you give to young people who are not sure about what they want to do?
Oh, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay.
But it's like, it comes to you when you're ready, and I think basically to you got to meet a lot of different people, associate with a lot of people, just talk to all sorts of people, out there with, different fields and,
Mm,
different nationalities. I think that was one of the things that I benefit from my father's job is that I went to the States, I went to the Middle East, and met all sorts of people,
mm,
and so I can sort of understand their culture and where they're coming from.
mm, mm, mm.
And, of course, like the photographer that I met who turned me on to photography and all that.
Right.
So yeah, I think, for young people, to meet as many people, as possible.
mm,
in
mm, mm.
various fields, it's helpful, because you sort of gain all this.
Yeah. More and more people are discovering Japan. And so if somebody is thinking about coming to live in Japan, what would you tell such a person? What kind of advice would you give to such a person? Yeah.
I've had a lot of people ask me about coming over to Japan to assist or work as a photographer, and I go, well, times are, since digital, it's changed everything,
Right.
and it's not that easy. And you know how it is here in Japan. I mean, even though they're open to foreigners, they're still like kind of close. Like, it's like, they could be like, that is son, they can be friendly. But then when it's like, can I work for you? They're like, not sure, and it's like, because they can't really freely communicate with these people because they don't speak English that well,
Right.
so they can't express it. And so I think if someone's coming to Japan, they have to be prepared that it's not easy like some other country where you can just go in and blend in. I think a city like New York, well, it's so expensive to go there now, so I don't think anyone can just casually go there. But I remember when I was in New York assisting Carl Fisher in the 80s,
Mm.
it was like anything was possible. I mean, you know you can just blend in that city and
Right.
no one will care,
Mm, mm, mm.
but here in Japan you really sort of have to, I think you need to speak Japanese because the Japanese don't speak enough English.
Right.
There's got to be a way to communicate to get really close, in order to do something, otherwise you're just like a tourist.
Right. And what it, maybe my final question, what do you see for the future? Do you feel that things are getting better here in Japan or yeah?
I don't think so. I think this is just a personal opinion. I just think
Okay.
it's really terrible. Like you look at the politics, the way that politicians are, the prime minister, what he's
Mm,
saying, and it's like, you know, I think it's not just Japan, but
right.
worldwide. I mean, I look at these world leaders, and I can't respect any of them.
Mm,
There's no
mm,
one out there that I can. Maybe the only person I might respect is the prime minister of New Zealand. The woman.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think women today, seem to make better leaders of the
Mm,
world.
mm,
Because I read this somewhere.
mm,
Men have this testosterone, so they gamble with things, whereas women are
right.
a little bit more, you know,
Mm, mm,
security minded. It's like they
right.
don't want to take chances, like doing something really radical.
Mm, 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 mm,
They're a little bit more conservative.
mm,
That's why things work out.
right.
They're more sane than men.
Mm, mm.
But
So there seems to be a leadership vacuum
I
throughout the world. Yeah.
think
Mm,
so. And
mm,
and not only just a leadership vacuum, but I think it's almost evil.
that bad. Yeah.
I can't believe what's happening like in Myanmar.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, people are all concerned about the Ukraine,
Mm, mm, mm,
and but no one's caring about Myanmar, what's happening in Myanmar,
mm.
or like tonight I was watching the news about some Iranian actress being incarcerated, because she said
Right.
something about it. And that the fact that they executed two people for demonstrating in Iran,
Mm,
that's crazy.
yeah. Mm, mm. It's tough.
It's tough.
Okay, so do you have any final message? Anything you've always wanted to say, but may not have had the chance to say?
I just said that about how I'm concerned about the world leadership.
Mm, yeah.
I mean, that's the problem. It's just it's all become very money oriented.
Right.
And what really makes me sick is that every time, like for example, the Olympics,
Yeah.
or recently with the COVID thing, and every time there's something where a large amount of money
Mm, mm,
moves out of there's people just grabbing,
Right.
stealing from it, you know.
Right.
And a lot of them are government officials.
Right.
And of course, I hate to name the company, but one of those advertising agencies
Right.
is usually involved, you know, and they take a chunk out. And you know, so it's not fair for everyone, you know. It's not a fair world.
Mm, mm. Well, thank you so very much for taking the time. Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to be a worthwhile interview for
Oh,
you.
certainly, yeah. I got the information that I wanted, and I think people would benefit from it. Yeah. So, thank
Yeah.
you very much. Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. You know, you look almost like you're about to go to sleep.
I'm okay.
You okay?
I'm okay. Yeah. Okay. So, bye for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye
Good
bye.
talking to you. Bye bye.